I think we can start there. So, hi, my name's Wendy from TechFest. I'm joined with my colleague Gabby, and thank you for joining us for our first live innovation masterclass as part of our STEM into Innovation program. And today we've got an amazing presentation on the real-world impacts of AI and social media from John Brown, who's joining us. John is currently a lecturer at RGU, where he teaches computing and the evolutionary neurophysiology of games and human-computer interaction, which is incredible, hence John's AI experience. John also is a research lead at the university on human factors, ergonomics, and human interactions, both with each other, environment, and our tools. And John comes to us today with a huge amount of expertise, having previously been a consultant at Facebook and Google. And amongst these, as if that's not impressive enough, John also is a cartoonist and plays in a band and has his own podcast called Sock Talk, which we can share the link to later. So welcome to you all today. And without further ado, John, if you're happy, I'll hand over to you.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that, Wendy. I hope everyone can hear me all right, see me all right. If not, try waving your hands and screaming. And no, don't do that. Nobody needs the excuse to wave their hands and scream.
John, so, sorry, if I can quickly say, we can take questions throughout. If you would like to put them in the chat, and we'll have a formal Q&A at the end of the presentation. In the meantime, if you can all keep your cameras and your microphones off, then that would be great. Sorry, John, I'll shut up now and hand over to you properly.
That's okay. After what I said, it's important that you interjected like that, Wendy. It's good to have you and Gabby here to keep me in line. So welcome, everyone. I'm here to talk to you today, as was just explained, about the real-world impacts of AI and social media. But what that really means is I want to talk to you about how the technology that's in your lives is very deliberately affecting you. And it's very deliberately affecting everyone you know, probably in ways that you haven't imagined. Now, that sounds like an awful lot to say, and I apologize for being like that, but I'd like to walk you through a few ideas here. Now, before I do that, I want to be clear. Yeah, I have a big, long name, and I have a whole lot of titles, so many letters after my name that it's actually kind of embarrassing. But please just call me John. Call me John if you have questions to ask here. Call me John if we happen to bump into each other in the street or in a classroom. It just makes it easier. Now, lots of people have opinions about technology, about AI. In fact, everybody you ask has opinions. It's sort of like the old saying, if you'll pardon my boulderizing an old saying, opinions are like noses. Everyone has one, and no one seems to realize that theirs smells just as much as everybody else's. So why do I have opinions about these kinds of things, about new technology and about AI? Well, first of all, take a look at some of the companies I've worked with. This is just a few of them. And in all of these companies, my job has been to be someone who comes in and solves problems. So I never worked directly for Amazon as an Amazon employee, and I never had the little Google initiation hat, but I worked with their people to solve problems they couldn't solve. And that's sort of the history of my job at all of these tiny little startups you see here, some of which you might not recognize. At the same time, though, while I've been doing that for decades, I've also been an academic for decades. So I have, and I know this is going to sound like bragging, but I am bragging a little bit so that you'll pay attention. I have 7 university degrees, and each one of them is in a different topic, and 3 of them are PhDs. Well, 2 of them are officially PhDs. One is the Italian version of a PhD called a Dottrich. But so I've not only worked in industry a lot, and I've also done work for a couple of different governments in the world, but I've not only worked in industry a lot with the companies that make the products we all use every day, I've also taught about them and studied them academically and worked with people in academic circles and universities on, gosh, what is it now, 3 or 4 continents? You can see some of the books that I've published here. The first 2 on the left are a couple of encyclopedias that I've got articles in. The Encyclopedia of Design from Bloomsbury in London, the Encyclopedia of Mathematics and Society from the United States. And then the other 3 are books that I either wrote or co-wrote and edited. So I've worked in all these different fields. I've been working with AI for about 7 years, trying to design, as you see in some of the paper titles there, AIs that could actually become self-aware based on how humans are self-aware, or that could communicate better across cyber physical systems, like the drones that get sent to other planets. So that's the kind of work that I do. I also work a lot in human factors and other things. I used to be in charge of the science side of investigating airplane crashes in Canada. All of this ties together for me, as Wendy was suggesting, as an idea of how humans work with each other and work with the machines that let us work better with each other. So that's where I'm coming from, and I hope that helps make sense. Now, I want to show you something complicated. This is going to be the only graph I'm going to show you in this presentation. It won't last long. Maybe you've heard online people talking about the Dunning-Kruger effect. That was a professor and a PhD student who came up with this cool idea. Don't look at the graph for a second. Just don't look at it at all. Just listen to this very short explanation of what it means. Basically, what they found out by studying all kinds of people is that the less you know about something, the less you think there is to know about that thing. So if you've never tried snowboarding, it's a really human thing to think, probably not hard, I could probably do it. You know, maybe I wouldn't be an Olympian right away, but I could probably do really well on it if I ever tried. And people tend to think that about everything. And so if you look at this curve now, we can see that your confidence goes up or down. You have different levels of confidence, and you have experience over time. And when you first start off and you've got no experience at all, that's when your confidence is the highest. When you first hear about something like snowboarding or caber tossing or just about anything else you can think of that most people have never tried. If you've never tried it, you probably think there's not much to it. And there's this period we call the period of false certainty, where it's absolutely normal for somebody who's heard a lot about something to think they probably have a good idea of everything there is to know about it. And that's why most people think they know an awful lot about AI, because we've all heard so much about it, even though it's really shallow, what we've heard. We've all heard so much about it, we feel like we're just covered in information about it. Oh, I've heard so much about it. I know all about AI. But most of us are sitting in that period of false certainty. And what happens is there's that moment right after that, the very beginnings of you getting an experience, where you suddenly come crashing to the ground, quite literally, if you're talking about snowboarding. You try it and the board goes out from under you and wham, you're on your butt. Or maybe you go down a hill and crash into the tree and lose all your teeth in the tree. No, I hope not. Anyway, the point is, something in the real world is going to let you know that you don't actually know everything there is about this. And then very slowly, you begin this process very slowly of picking yourself up off the ground. And if you stick with it, then you can gain more experience over time. So I talk about this in some of my work with AI, but this is a human thing. And this is what happens when you're learning things on your own. You have this false certainty, I could do that for sure. And then you come crashing to the ground. And a lot of people give up after crashing to the ground. Most people give up. If you crash hard to the ground 3 times, we're done. We go on to other things. The famous Dr. Einstein, who everyone said was so smart, he said it himself. He didn't think he was that smart. He said the big difference is he didn't give up on his problems. He'd stick with problems for years instead of just a couple of tries. So if you can get past your frustrations at not being the best at something, you can learn and get to a point where you're doing pretty well. If you're learning on your own, that's the cool thing about teaching. And you see, teaching gets rid of all that. Teaching gets rid of that false certainty. If you can be a good student, that means saying, I don't know everything in the world about this. There are other people who know more than I do. And then you can just start from here without the frustration of crashing to the ground, and slowly over years build up your knowledge until you get somewhere. That's what we call sociogenesis in the realm of psychology, where you're learning from others, instead of psychogenesis, where you're learning on your own. And I'll tell you all a secret. Good teachers start here too. Good teachers avoid that whole thing about false certainty. And I've been a teacher myself for years, big fan of teaching. I've been a student for even longer, and I'm a big fan of studies. And it's just plain easier if you always start down here saying, I don't have much knowledge about this. My confidence is low in being able to do this, but my confidence is high in being able to learn how to over time with practice. So that's the big teachy lecture I'm going to give you. Now let's get on to the fun stuff about AI and digital science. Could you all please just try to read this? What I want to do is I want to give you the notion that humans and AIs think differently than each other. Yes, they do. Everybody who says that an AI is actually an artificial intelligence, these things like ChatGPT and all of his cousins and sisters and friends, those aren't artificial intelligences. They're something else. And we'll talk about that. But I want to start with the idea that a human can read this. Anyone who can read English can read this. And I hope you've all gotten through it. And just to make the point now, I want to show you another one. Can you read this? Give it a try. When you first look at it, it seems, no, this is ridiculous. This isn't English. But if you keep trying a little bit, you should be able to read this just as well as you could read the other one. Everybody getting through that okay? I hope you're all paying attention and having a chance to read these. In case you missed the last two, I'm going to give you one more. But those of you who've done the last two, take a look at this too, because it's going to be another kind of change. Are you all ready for it? Everybody looking at the screen? I'll get the cursor out of the way. Everybody set, here we go. So when you're trying to read that, a couple of really cool things are happening. Any one of those messages, in the one case, we had numbers and letters mixed together, but your brain could figure out how to unscramble that in order to turn it into words. In the other case, the first and last letters of each word were correct. The stuff inside was all mixed up, but it was only the right letters, but they were all mixed up. But you could still read, and the more easily you read, the more easily you could do that without even really having to decode it. After a moment to realize what's going on, you could read it just by glancing at each word, and your brain automatically figured it out into the right order of letter. This is harder because here, all the words are there, but they're in the wrong place. And yet, your brain can figure out how to read it after just a couple of minutes. In all of these cases, if you speak and read and write in more than one language, it's easier for you to do it with one language being manipulated like this. But in all of these cases, a native speaker who can read and write should be able to read all of these sentences. So what's going on? Well, allow me to elaborate. What's going on is that the way that you think about language is not word by word or letter by letter. You start off using language by thinking about something. You have some idea in your head, cogito ergo, blah, 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 I think, therefore, blah, blah, blah. Whatever your idea is in your head, it starts off there, and then you turn it into a whole thing of language, whatever language you speak, whether it's reading or writing, whether it's speaking and listening, whether it's signing and seeing, whichever one it is, you turn it into a language after it's a series of thoughts. Now, I know sometimes you say things without thinking. Absolutely, we all do that sometimes. But generally speaking, you only use words to express ideas. That's what words are for. That's how they evolved. That's how languages evolved, for us to be able to express and share our thoughts with one another. Now, sharing our thoughts with one another is sometimes difficult, and a lot of people get frustrated by that. I've got here a couple of pages from The Little Prince, Le Petit Prince, by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. And if you haven't read the book, you really should. It's a simple little children's story that's full of great messages about life. The first of the 2 pages here, this person, this character in the book is talking about how when he was a kid, he drew a hat. Well, he did a drawing, and all the grown-ups would say, "Oh, it's such a good drawing of a hat. You've really drawn a hat." And he was frustrated because it wasn't a hat. It was a boa constrictor that was trying to digest an elephant. And on the next page, he said, so what I had to do was I had to draw it so that you could see the inside of the boa constrictor. That way, even adults could figure it out, because grown-ups always need things to be explained to them. And I think that's a beautiful idea, because we do always need things to be explained to us. Because if things aren't explained to us, we'll make up our own version of the truth. And instead of seeing a very sad picture of an elephant being digested by a boa constrictor, we might see a picture of a hat. Now, that's just how our brains work. We make sense of things and we assume that they're right. Remember that Dunning-Kruger curve? Every day when we look and hear and see the things around us, when we smell and feel and touch them, we're experiencing things that we compare to our mental models inside our head of how things should be. And what happens is we get lost in the comparison. We stop paying attention to the real world. Because if something is close enough to what we think it should be, then we decide that's what it is. And that's dangerous. Especially when some new technology comes along and everybody is telling you it's just like humans, or it's even more than humans. So this is a headline from the New York Times. New Navy device learns by doing. Psychologist shows embryo of computer designed to read and grow wiser. Sound familiar? Right? Here's a little quote from inside the New Yorker magazine. It seems to us a serious rival to the human brain. Right? Sounds familiar, right? You guys all know what I'm talking about, right? No, you don't. These were headlines and news stories in 1958. The first time that somebody, his name was Rosenblatt, a university psychologist working for the Navy, the first time that he proposed that you could build artificial neural networks, or ANNs, something that replicated the way the brain works, but was made out of metal and wires and other things, had electricity running through it instead of the electrochemical reactions along our own nerves. So he proposed this. And it was the biggest news in the world because it looked to everybody like, man, any minute now, we're going to have machines that think like we do. So that didn't happen. He called it a perceptron. And he was picking up the work that other people have been doing since the 30s in theory, like the great Dr. Einstein doing these thought experiments, as he called it, where you try to figure out very precisely in your thoughts how something could work. But Dr. Rosenblatt was the first person who actually built one. And other people had tried to build them. And he got a lot of criticism from the scientific community while he was becoming the most funded scientist there was. And everybody was talking about, this is any minute now, we're going to have artificial thinking, we're going to have androids and robots, and that's going to happen. And it didn't happen. A couple of years later, about 10 years later, two of his competitors from another school wrote a book called Perceptrons. Their names were Minsky and Papert. And they showed pretty concretely how Rosenblatt's idea of an artificial brain couldn't really be built with 1950s or 60s technology. It would have to be just enormous. It would be bigger than a house if you wanted to have as many layers of these handmade nerves as we have in our brain. Instead of being brain-sized, it would have to be the size of a shopping center. And they just said it's not going to happen, it's not practical. And they also argued, wait a minute, we found a problem that these things can't deal with. They can't understand some things. So perceptrons disappeared for a long time, for about 15, 20 years. Nobody worked in AI. People were using the same kind of structure, but they were using it to try and build things like chatbots. Now, you all know what a chatbot is, even if you've never heard the word. If you contact someone to complain about something, not a person in your life, but if you contact a company to complain about something, very often they ask you to type in text into a window and some friendly person introduces themselves and they type back and forth with you, but they never seem to understand exactly what you're saying. That's a chatbot, okay? Chatbots are designed with the idea that eventually they should be able to fool the average normal person into thinking they're talking with a human instead of a piece of software code. That's the purpose of a chatbot. A lot of chatbots got used for recommender systems. That's another thing that became really popular. Recommender systems were this idea that if you can follow the patterns that people are following, then you can recommend to them what they should do next and maybe steer them, some people realize, towards what you want them to do instead of what they want to do. Now, if those kinds of things sound familiar to you, I promise it gets worse, because the time came when we started carrying these little devices around with us, carrying them around, and they're all full of these algorithms. They're all full of different systems that are recommending things to us all the time, that are learning the patterns of how we behave. and recommending the next thing. Now, you may not be certain that that's happening, but I promise you it is. Every time you go on social media, there are recommendations coming to you, being recommended by an algorithm that's sort of a modern version of an AI, not a real artificial intelligence, but it's able to learn the kind of things that are interesting to you. So it shows you those things again. Now, if you want to, and I'm not saying you should do this because it might seem rude, but if you wanted to, you could, next time a friend hands you their phone or a parent hands you their phone, scroll through their social media and pause when an ad comes up that you know they would hate. Don't click on it. Don't click on ads ever, but just pause there. And if you pause there for a second or two or three, when you start scrolling again, the same ad is going to come up again very soon, because the algorithm in your phone, the algorithm in the app you're using, the social media program you're using, has learned to show that again. Hey, you looked at it for a long time. Let's show it to you again. Maybe you'll click on it. Ooh, ah. And so it'll start doing that. You can set up a whole bunch of really miserable ads to keep coming up again and again on somebody else's phone. Don't try it with your own phone. It's already doing that to you as best as it can. So that's sort of what's become of AI. Now, yeah, absolutely. The Nobel Prize was recently awarded to one of the three men who developed in Canada about 20 years ago the first things that people call AIs now, which are large language model, artificial neural networks that function as chatbots and are able to search for things and figure things out. But I'm going to explain it to you in a minute. They don't think. They don't think the way we do. They could not read those sentences we read and understand them because they can't actually understand any. What they're really good at doing is they're really good at figuring out what is probably going to come next if it's similar to what they've already learned. So on your phone right now, there are so many of those. And I want to ask you who's your closest friend? You don't have to shout out and answer. That wouldn't help because I can't hear you anyway, but think about it for a minute. Who's your most important friend? Who's the one person who can interrupt you when you're in the middle of a conversation with anyone else? Is it your mom? Is it your best friend from school or from sports? The one person who can interrupt you no matter what else you're doing is your phone. And it does it all the time, right? When was the last time you said to someone you were talking with, oh, I got to get this, it's my phone? When was the last time you just answered your phone without even saying it? Maybe you just put up your hand and answered your phone to stop them. Because your phone has convinced you that it's the most important thing in your life. Not by talking to you logically about it, that wouldn't work, but by working with you and letting you know all the time that you can count on it. The only thing is you can't. These modern AIs that seem to be able to think, like ChatGPT, they can't think. They can just look for patterns and then try to repeat them. And the result is they make horrible mistakes. This is a mistake that was flagged on social media about a year and a half ago by a very clever graduate student in California who was studying search. And just take a look at that paragraph. I'll read it for those who have a hard time reading. So somebody has done a search, country in Africa that starts with the letter K. Those of you who know the continent of Africa, and even those of you who don't, might know that the only country in the continent of Africa that starts with K is Kenya. But here's what the answer came back. While there are 54 recognized countries in Africa, none of them begin with the letter K. The closest is Kenya, which starts with a K sound, but is actually spelled with the K sound. It's always interesting to learn new trivia facts like this. That's a chatbot. That's a chatbot being asked to do something that chatbots can't really do. It's being asked to look up how many countries in Africa start with K, and it's coming back with an answer that's completely false because chatbots can't tell the truth because they can't think. They can just form patterns. And they listen to other chatbots more than they listen to humans. And they trust the words written by other chatbots more than they trust the words written by humans. So you end up with nonsense like this. And that's funny. And the whole world laughed about that. Well, the whole world that pays attention to these things laughed about that about a year and a half ago. And some of us have been laughing ever since. but sometimes it's not so funny. In San Francisco, shortly after I left Silicon Valley, in San Francisco, the city suddenly allowed these driverless cars to serve as taxis. And I won't tell you what happened on the first weekend. That's gross. But what did happen eventually is that all of these cars were just everywhere in the city. And it led to a problem that the clever people who make and design and maintain them never thought about. This is a photo shared by ABC News 7 in San Francisco. This is a photo clipped from a video. Somebody in an apartment building is filming a parking lot at 2 in the morning. The parking lot outside of their building, and you can see there's an apartment building on the other side, is full of these driverless cars that are all trying to park, because once the evening is over, they're sent to park there for the night. The thing is, these cars are programmed to honk their horns and flash their lights if another car gets too close. So as they're all trying to park at the same time, they're all constantly honking their horns and flashing their lights for hours at 2 in the morning. And nobody in the company thought, you know, we could turn that off at 2 a.m. We could turn that off within our parking lot. It went on and on and on, and that's not the worst of it. This is a bridge in Bareilly in Uttar Pradesh, province of India. And last fall, 3 people were driving along following directions on Google Maps and drove up the bridge that had been partially washed away and never reconstructed. They drove right off the edge, and you can see the wreck of their car there. Those 3 people were killed following Google Maps instead of their eyes because they trusted it so much. They trusted it more than what they saw around them. Now, there's currently a lawsuit going on about this because Google Maps is at least partially to blame. If they're giving people directions right now, and they're not up to date on the fact that part of the bridge was washed out and never replaced, aren't they responsible if they're giving people directions saying this is a safe way to drive? Well, they're saying they're not responsible. And there were other problems. Officials there didn't have signs up warning people because it's a bridge mostly used by locals, and all the locals knew it was under repair, so they didn't have signs up telling other people not to drive on the bridge. It's a complicated issue, but certainly Google Maps is why they drove off it. They were following Google Maps and they trusted it, and it could be worse. Maybe you've never heard of Arve Hjalmar Holman. Yeah, it's a strange sounding name, even with my Canadian accent. But Mr. Holman is a normal, everyday Norwegian guy who was reported on social media by people doing searches, just looking up his name, It came back that he was the father of 2 boys who he killed. And they give his name and his hometown. They give the names of his boys. They give all kinds of information, including the fact that he was eventually convicted for murdering his 2 sons and trying to kill a 3rd son, and that he's been sentenced to 21 years in prison, the most that Norway will do. Almost all of that is true. The part that isn't true is that he ever hurt any of his children. He never did, ever. There was never a court case about it. There was never an accusation of it. He's a kind and loving father with more than just 3 sons. He's also got daughters. Good member of the community, a nice, normal, everyday person who now, according to the internet, is an accused murderer serving time in prison. Please don't trust the apps on your phone. Don't trust these AIs to give you truth. They won't. They don't know how. They can't think like we think. They don't understand that words reflect ideas. They can't. They don't have the structure to do that. All they know is that letters add up to words, and words add up to phrases, and phrases add up to sentences. And if you follow the patterns, you can write sentences that look like they were written by you. Please, please don't let them convince you that they're telling truths, because they're not. If you want to find out about something, go to a library and ask a librarian. It's a much better way. Or come to one of these innovation masterclasses and ask someone if they'd only stop talking and let you ask your question.
Excellent. John, thank you so much. I think that if there's no more questions, that's pretty much time for us. And as if you want to learn more from John, he's got a podcast and yeah, a lot of information out and about. If you, I don't know if they can find you by looking you up in a library, John, or should we look you up on Google? There we go. And Gabby's very kindly shared the link to John's talk, so you'll get a little bit more. Yeah, that's it for our first live innovation masterclass, and hopefully we'll see you for some more soon. Thank you, John. Thank you very much.